Normandy. Normandy sits in the northwest of France, right along the English Channel. Its cool and green climate makes it ideal for raising dairy cattle. The local breed called Normandy was brought by Norsemen in the 9th and 10th centuries and became known for its rich, high-fat milk, which led to butter, cheese, and cream dominating the cuisine. Cooks from this region treat dairy products as premium ingredients. Camembert de Normandie is noticeably more complex than the typical industrial Camembert versions found worldwide. It was created in the late 1700s, supposedly by a farmer named Marie Harel in the village of Camembert. One of the oldest cheeses in France, Le Varot, was also created in Normandy around the 13th century, and has a sticky orange rind and a very pungent smell. The taste is assertive and strong, almost meaty. Normandy cooking is rich and creamy, and apples are used very often to balance that richness. Apples have been grown there for well over 1,000 years, and are used to make cider and calvados, a strong apple brandy with a warm sweetness. One of the most famous dairy areas is Isigny-sur-Mer, a small town near the coast. The sea air helps give the grass extra minerals, which makes the butter rich and slightly golden. The cream there is thick, smooth, and a bit nutty in flavor. Brittany. Brittany is a region in the west of France with a rough, windy coast and strong Celtic roots. It was an independent duchy until 1532, and even had its own Celtic language. The food there is simple and shaped by the land and sea. Crepes originated in Brittany during the 13th century, initially created as thin, savory buckwheat pancakes known as galettes. Historically, most of France had to pay a heavy salt tax, except for Brittany, which allowed its farmers to use salt in their butter, while others use unsalted versions. Over time, this created a taste for salty, slightly crunchy butter, often with bits of sea salt in it. Breton bakers actually made an entire category of pastries built around salted butter, and the most famous of them is Queen-Amand, which means butter cake. The area is also known for its oysters, especially Boulogne oysters, which have a strong, slightly metallic taste. One traditional dish is cotriade, a simple fish stew. Fishermen made it using leftover fish, cooking it with potatoes and onions. It's light and clear, not heavy like other French fish stews, and is usually eaten with bread and lots of salted butter. Brittany is not particularly known for wine, since the climate is too cold and wet for viticulture. Instead, they drink ciders, which are generally a bit sweeter and fruitier. There is also chouchen, a Breton mead made from honey, which has been produced in the region since at least the medieval period. Alsace. Alsace is a region in the northeast of France, right next to the Rhine River. Its food is a mix of French and German styles due to centuries of being fought over between France and Germany. The food culture absorbed Germanic cooking while retaining French technique and sensibility. Because of the cold winters, the cuisine uses things like preserved meats, fermented vegetables, and strong white wines. A common dish is choucroute garnie. It's made with sauerkraut, which is finely cut cabbage that has been fermented in salty water. This method has been used since the 1600s to help people get vitamins during long winters. The sauerkraut is cooked with white wine like Riesling and spices like juniper berries and pepper. It's usually served with different types of pork, such as smoked sausages or salted pork belly. Flammekuche, also called tarte flambée, started as a way for bakers to test their ovens. They would put a thin piece of dough inside, and if it cooked quickly without burning, the oven was ready. Over time, people started adding toppings like cream, onions, and bacon. Unlike most of France, wines in this region are named after the grape, like Riesling and Pinot Gris. These are mostly white wines with a fresh, slightly floral taste that pairs well with the rich local food. The region also has a strong baking tradition, especially around the winter holidays. Kouglof is a tall, soft cake with raisins and almonds, often eaten for breakfast. During December, people make many kinds of small cookies called bredel. Lorraine. While Alsace is shaped by the Rhine River, Lorraine's food comes more from its farms and orchards. It's also where two famous French foods come from, quiche Lorraine and the Madeleine. Quiche Lorraine is a big savory custard tart made with smoked pork belly, eggs, and cream in a short pasty crust. The addition of cheese, which is very common in France and around the world, is technically not traditional. The original quiche Lorraine contained no cheese at all. The word quiche comes from the German Kuchen, meaning cake. The dish was documented in French cookbooks from the 19th century, but versions of it existed in Lorraine for much longer. The Mirabelle plum is another specialty of the region, which has an ideal climate and soil composition for the cultivation of this fruit. Lorraine grows about 70% of the world's supply. These small plums are eaten fresh, made into jam, baked into tarts, or distilled into a brandy called eau de vie. Lorraine is also known for its madeleines, the shell-shaped sponge cakes from the town of Commercy in Lorraine, where it has been produced since at least the 18th century. It's a simple little butter cake flavored with lemon zest and vanilla, with a slightly dense moist crumb and a characteristic hump on the back caused by the shock of cold batter meeting hot tin. The Commercy Madeleine is a bit richer and more buttery than most commercial versions. Lyon. Lyon has been considered for centuries not just the culinary capital of France, but by some accounts, the gastronomic capital of the entire world. Lyonnais cooking focuses on excellent local ingredients, generous portions, robust technique, and zero wasted effort. The bouchon is a specific type of small restaurant found almost exclusively in Lyon and serves traditional Lyonnais cooking. They typically have small menus that change with the season, red checkered tablecloths, and a slightly chaotic, loud atmosphere. The saucisson de Lyon is a large air-dried pork sausage, typically with coarse textured meat, a white powdery mold on the exterior, and a rich, fatty, slightly tangy flavor. It's eaten sliced at room temperature, often as a starter. The Lyonnais tradition includes a specific type of celebration of the charcuterie's art. Sausages of every type, terrines, head cheese, pig trotters, and prepared meats appear everywhere. Tablier de sapeur, which means sapper's apron, is a classic dish made from beef tripe. It's marinated in white wine and mustard, then covered in breadcrumbs and fried. The name comes from the leather aprons worn by military engineers because the texture looks similar. Andouillette is a sausage made from pork intestines. It has a very strong smell and is usually grilled and served with mustard sauce. Quenelles de brochet are another classic. They are soft dumplings made from pike, mixed with butter, cream, and eggs, then poached until light and airy. The texture is very delicate, but getting it right takes real skill. Lyon also has a tradition called machon. This was a late morning meal eaten by silk workers, known as canuts, after long night shifts. Provence. Provence food is very different from the rich, buttery dishes of northern France. Olive oil, garlic, and tomatoes are very common. The region is the southeastern corner of France, stretching from the lower Rhone Valley to the Italian border, and from the Alps down to the Mediterranean coastline. The climate is hot and dry in summer, the soil is stony and poor in much of the interior, and the landscape is rockier. A very prominent dish from Provence is bouillabaisse from Marseille. It started as a simple fisherman's stew made with leftover fish. Today, it's fancy and must have at least 4 kinds of Mediterranean fish like scorpion fish, sea robin, and conger eel. First, the broth comes with saffron, fennel, and orange zest, and a garlicky chili sauce called rouille on toasted bread. Then, the fish are served whole and filleted at the table. The real traditional ratatouille comes from Nice and is a rough, humble vegetable stew of eggplant, zucchini, tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, garlic, and olive oil, cooked slowly until the vegetables collapse into a soft, deeply flavored mass. It is a peasant food designed to use up surplus summer vegetables. The tian-style preparation, where vegetables are sliced thin and arranged in overlapping circles, exists too, but is a more refined and modern interpretation. Another staple is tapenade, a pasta made of black olives, capers, and anchovies. It's salty and intense, great as an appetizer with a glass of chilled rosé. On Christmas Eve, Provence has a tradition called the 13 desserts. They represent Jesus and the 12 apostles. Some examples are the 4 beggars, nuts and dried fruits, calisson, almond candies, and pompe à l'huile, a sweet bread with olive oil and orange flower water. The Southwest. The southwest of France, with places like Gascony and Périgord, is known for big, earthy flavors, where fat is prized as the ultimate carrier of taste, and duck and goose are everywhere. People use every part of the bird, often preserving it with the old method called confit. The region is famous for foie gras, which is rich, buttery, and fancy. But a more local, everyday dish is duck confit. Duck legs are cooked slowly in their own fat until the meat is soft enough to pull apart with a fork. Back in the day, people would store the meat in jars under a layer of fat to keep it for months. When cooked in a pan, the skin gets very crispy while the insides stay extremely soft. Périgord is the main home of the black truffle, or black diamond. These grow underground near oak trees and are hunted in winter using trained dogs or pigs. The smell of a fresh truffle is incredibly earthy, chocolatey, and musky, and is used to make simple dishes more fancy like eggs or steak. The region also makes good walnuts, which are pressed into oils that add a nutty, slightly bitter kick to salads. In Bordeaux, the food is influenced by the Atlantic and the wine world. A classic dish is a ribeye steak cooked in red wine with shallots and sometimes topped with poached marrow. For dessert, the cannelé is a tiny fluted cake that has a crunchy caramel-like crust and a soft custardy center flavored with rum and vanilla. They started as a way to use leftover egg yolks from winemaking in local nunneries. The Loire Valley. The Loire River stretches across the center of France, and the region surrounding it, sometimes called the Garden of France, is defined by rich river soils, a temperate climate, and a centuries-long tradition of producing food and wine for the French royal court. During the 15th and 16th centuries, many of the most important chateaux were built here because the region was close enough to Paris but offered the finest produce, game, fish, and wine in the country. Cooking for royalty demands a certain refinement, and that sensibility became part of the regional food culture. The river has lots of freshwater fish like pike and perch. One famous dish is a whitefish served with buttery sauce made from white wine, vinegar, and shallots. The sauce is smooth and light, with a slightly tangy flavor that makes the fish taste fresh and delicate. The Loire Valley is one of the best places in France for goat cheese. The region produces more varieties of goat cheese than almost anywhere else in France, and several have protected designations. Celle séchère is a flat disc coated in fine black ash, with a creamy white interior and a mild, slightly tangy flavor. The region is also known for rillettes de tour, a pork spread made by slow-cooking meat in fat. The tarte tatin comes from Le Maupeveron at the Hotel Tatin. The story goes that one of the Tatin sisters accidentally cooked apples in butter and sugar too long. To fix it, she put the pastry on top, baked it, then flipped it over. The result is a caramelized upside-down apple tart with a buttery, flaky crust that is common across the region. The Loire Valley has a huge range of wines. In the west, Muscadet is crisp and light, perfect with oysters. And inland, Anjou makes soft whites and top dessert wines from Chenin Blanc. The Alps. Food from the French Alps, especially in Savoie, is very calorie-dense and designed to keep you warm and strong in the cold mountain environment. Savoie, which became part of France only in 1860, was previously part of the Kingdom of Sardinia and had its own identity and food traditions that were shaped as much by Italian and Swiss cooking as by French. The central product of Savoyard cuisine is mountain cheese. Buffo is perhaps the finest, a large wheel of cooked pressed cheese aged for a minimum of 5 months and often much longer. It has a dense, supple texture and a deeply complex flavor, fruity and slightly sweet when young, developing more savory, nutty, and caramel notes with age. The milk comes from Tarentaise or Abondance cows that graze on specific mountain pastures, and the different plants they eat at altitude contribute to the complexity of the milk and ultimately the cheese. Tartiflette is actually a modern dish from the 1980s. Cheesemakers made it to sell more reblanchon. It's now a classic comfort food with potatoes, onions, and bacon baked under a whole wheel of reblanchon cheese. Another dish is fondue savoyard. You dip bread into a pot of melted comté, beaufort, and emmental mixed with white wine and garlic. It's a social, cozy meal often eaten together. For dessert, Savoie cake is one of the lightest cakes in French pastry. It's a very airy and spongy cake made with a large number of eggs, beaten extensively to incorporate air with almost no fat, resulting in a texture that is uniquely delicate, almost dry, and very finely crumbed. It was reportedly created in the 14th century for a visit of the Holy Roman Emperor to the Count of Savoie, who requested something as light as the alpine air. The cake is seriously remarkable for how light it is relative to its appearance. Languedoc. Languedoc is one of the oldest and most historically important regions of France, home to the ancient port of Narbonne, which was once the first Roman colony in Gaul. The region's cuisine blends Mediterranean flavors with hearty mountain traditions, sitting at the crossroads of Catalan influence from just over the Spanish border, Basque influence from the southwest, and rich inland mountain cooking. Cassoulet is a common slow-cooked bean stew made in a deep round pot called a cassole. The exact origins of the dish within the region are still debated. In Nîmes, far from the ocean, the local dish is brandade de morue. It's salt cod whipped with olive oil into a creamy paste. In the 1700s, salt from the Camargue was traded for dried cod from the Atlantic. The cod is stirred with garlic and olive oil until smooth. Traditionally, it has no potatoes and is often served with croutons rubbed with garlic. The oysters and shellfish from the Thau lagoon near Montpellier and Sète are some of the best in France. The Thau is a saltwater lagoon cut off from the Mediterranean by a narrow beach. Its calm, mineral-rich waters make oysters that are smaller, but packed with flavor compared to Atlantic ones. Mussels from Bouzic, a village on the lagoon, are also very good, fat, and sweet. They're used in tiel, a small pastry from Sète filled with octopus and cuttlefish in a spiced tomato sauce. Tiel comes from Spanish and Italian recipes brought to Sète by immigrant fishermen in the 1800s. Roquefort cheese from the Languedoc, made in the village of Roquefort-sur-Soulzan, is one of the oldest and most famous cheeses in the world. It's made from raw sheep's milk and aged in natural caves on the Camembert Plateau. The caves have been used for at least 1,000 years, and in 1411, King Charles VI gave the village the exclusive right to age Roquefort there, the first official food designation in history. The sweet wines from Banyuls and Moscon de Frontignan are also some of Europe's best fortified wines. The Basque Country. The Basque people are one of the oldest indigenous peoples in Europe, with a language, Euskara, that has no known relatives and no connection to any other language family on Earth. The Basque people have lived in the Western Pyrenees, on both sides of the French-Spanish border, for longer than recorded history can trace, and their cuisine is very distinct. The dishes are colorful, often spicy, and chocolate is a local specialty. In the 1500s, Basque sailors who sailed with Christopher Columbus brought chili peppers home to the village of Espelette. Over time, these peppers adapted to the area and became the famous piment d'Espelette. This is the only spice in France that has an official AOC label, which means it can only be grown in a few Basque villages. The pepper is mildly hot like a jalapeno, with a smoky, sweet taste. It's used instead of black pepper in many dishes. Axoa is a simple, hearty stew made with minced veal or lamb, onions, green peppers, and lots of Espelette pepper. It used to be a dish for market days and village festivals, showing the communal spirit of Basque to life. A famous Basque snack is pincho. These are small snacks on bread with a toothpick. Unlike Spanish tapas, pincho are often fancy and creative, and bars compete to make the best ones. Basque fishermen were among the earliest European deep-sea fishermen, sailing to Newfoundland and Iceland centuries ago in search of cod. Salt cod, as a result, is deeply embedded in Basque cooking on both sides of the border. Chocolate was also introduced to France through the Basque country, brought by Spanish and Portuguese Jewish merchants who settled in Bayonne in the 16th and 17th century after their expulsion from the Iberian Peninsula. They brought the knowledge of chocolate production with them. For a long time, Bayonne was the center of French chocolate production, and the Guild of Bayonne Chocolatiers was one of the most powerful in France. The Gâteau Basque is the defining regional cake. It's a thick buttery cake filled with either black cherry jam from Ichiso or almond pastry cream. Its golden crust and moist inside make it a great end to a Basque meal.